Alright, so I'm going to give a short little video tutorial thing about some strategies that you use while racing. And the first thing that's really important to understand is the different race courses that are used in high school sailing. So we have the first one that's used, it isn't used super often, but it is used in Portland sometimes, is what's called a windward-leeward course. So you'll have a windward mark up here. The starting line will be down here. So here's the pin. Here's the boat, the committee boat. So you'll have the windward mark up to windward, the starting line, and then the leeward mark will be actually on the windward side of the starting line. And another course that you'll see a lot is called a modified windward-leeward. Whenever you see the word modified, it just means that regular one, except the starting line's in the middle of the course. So the modified windward-leeward, the leeward mark is going to be underneath the starting line as opposed to on top of it. Now what happens with a regular windward-leeward, where the leeward mark is above the starting line, this always has to be a twice around, because you start here, you go upwind, round the windward mark, and then round the leeward mark, then you have to round the windward again, and then finish downwind. With a modified windward-leeward, it'll either be a once around or twice around, but you'll always finish upwind. So you'll start, go around the windward mark. Now, something you have to know is if the starting line is open or closed, because some races you're allowed to go through the line while going downwind. Other races you'll get disqualified if you go through the line. So modified windward-leeward, you go around windward, around leeward, and then either finish upwind or go twice around and then finish the next time you go upwind. Another one that Portland does sometimes, which I do not like at all, is a port triangle or a modified port triangle. So a port triangle is where you have the pin right here, the committee boat right there, and then you have a windward mark up here, then a reach mark or a jibe mark. So you reach, it's a broad reach to that mark, then you jibe around it, and then a broad reach down to this leeward mark. So again, like I was saying, for the modified windward-leeward versus windward-leeward, this means that you have to go upwind, around that windward mark, around this jibe mark, around that leeward mark, and then it has to be twice around. That means that the second time around you'll go through the finish instead of to that leeward mark. The same thing I was saying with the other courses. The modified port triangle, you have the pin, boat, and then windward mark, jibe mark, leeward mark. So again, modified, the starting line is in the middle of the course. So you'll go around, jibe mark, leeward mark, and then either finish or go twice around. They use this a lot when it's super windy to avoid a lot of like clogging at the leeward mark. But I really don't like this course because the downwind leg doesn't involve any strategy. Once you round that windward mark, it's just a parade. They're just boats in a line going to this mark, and yeah, it leaves very little opportunity to pass boats while going downwind. Alright, the first real strategy piece in a race is the start. And it's very important. You want a good start. The start is not everything, but if you have a good start, you're much more likely to have a good race. So here we have, this is a fair line. That means that it's exactly 90 degrees to the wind, and the windward mark is exactly in the middle of the line, directly to windward. This never happens. There is never a perfect race course. It's either the starting line's either off center, or the windward mark is misplaced, or the pin or the line is crooked. So the pin could be down here, and that means that it's very boat favored, because any boat that starts here will be about a boat length ahead of the boat that starts down here. Or it can be just the opposite, so that the pin is favored, and so this boat that starts here will be about 1 or 2 boat lengths ahead of a boat that starts right here. And yeah, a way to check for that is you can go, what I normally do is I go to the committee boat side, and I'll sail my boat over here, and then I'll go head to wind. So I'll stall my boat right here, and I'll look over here and sight the line and see if I am exactly 90 degrees. So I'll hold my arm out exactly 90 degrees to the boat, and then I'll see what difference that has to this angle, or this straight line right here. So if the wind were coming from, say, this direction, that means that my stalled boat will be pointing that way, and my arm will be pointing this way, and I'll be looking at the angle that these would intersect here. So this means that this is a starboard favored course by, I don't know, let's say 20 degrees, because my arm has about a 20-degree difference to the sight that I have on the line. And a lot of times you can tell by, there might be a flag on the pin over here. There's always a flag on the committee boat, but something to really keep in mind is don't gauge which end is favored based on where the committee boat is swinging, because the current has a large effect on the direction of the committee boat. A couple of weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago when we were in Portland, there was about 3 knots of current, and the wind was coming from this direction, but the committee boat was swinging this way. So it was impossible to tell where the wind was coming from based on the direction of the committee boat. This is because the current was flowing at about 3 knots in this direction. There's about 2 knots of wind. So it was really, really hard conditions to sail, and you really don't want the start to be what messes you up in those conditions. Alright, so say that you have identified the favored end of the starting line. So wind's coming from this direction. Say it's a starboard favored line. So the pin will be down here. Perpendicular to the wind is this direction. So this line's pretty starboard favored. So now what you want to do when you're coming up on the start for this race is you really want to make a hole for yourself at the line. And the way to do this is to, you want to really know where you're going to be. You want to really know where you're going. So with this, you really want to be towards this end of the line, because like I was saying earlier, a boat that starts here is going to be a boat length or 2 ahead of the boat that starts down here directly off the line. And that's quite a bit of distance in your favor at the start of a race. So yeah, the way that you want to do that is you really want to be on the line with your spot reserved at about 30 seconds or even before that. A lot of people do try to barge, but if you want to go for this favored end, barging doesn't work that often. If I do barge, I'm aiming for the middle of the line, because I know I'm not going to get a spot over on the favored end. So yeah, what you're going to want to do is that within the last 45 seconds, you want to be right here with your boat stopped at no later than 30 seconds. And then when you get to be down to the last 10 seconds, you're going to start thinking about accelerating, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In those last 5 seconds, you want to get your boat, you want to roll your boat, get on a close hauled course, flatten, get that acceleration, and then you want to be right on the line at go. You don't want to be starting to accelerate your boat at go. You want to be right there with speed, ready to go. Yeah, and so that's basically if you're going for the favored end. If you get really big fleets, it's going to be kind of hard to get a spot on the line, so barging is really difficult. So there are circumstances where you're going to have to reserve that hole for yourself at the line, regardless of where you are. Even if you're down on this unfavored end, you're still going to have to reserve your spot. But in general, with high school races, you only really have to reserve that spot if you're going to be aggressive and go right there to the favored end. There's normally some opening down middle of the line. Yeah, so the first upwind tactic that we're going to talk about is it's really important. You want to sail your long tack first. You want to sail your long tack first. So this strategy, this does not depend on the favor of the line. So let's say you have a perfect course here. So the line is exactly perpendicular to where the windward mark is, but the wind is slightly to starboard. So what this means is it's a starboard favored course, like we were doing before. You go over here, you sight the line. This is a very starboard favored course, which also means that the starboard side of the line is favored. So what you want to do in this instance is you want to start the race on starboard, preferably at the boat end of the line, and you want to sail this starboard tack for as long as you can, and then you want to tack over and then round the mark. What that does is it maximizes your opportunity for gain. So you never know exactly how long the wind is going to stay in this direction. So you really want to take advantage of that lifted tack for as long as possible. And by sailing that long tack first, you put yourself in a good position to gain on other boats that may tack earlier, and they may have missed that long starboard lift that you had through that windward leg of that race. So like I was saying earlier, this strategy does not depend on what the orientation of the line is. So if you have a course where the line may be very port favored, so that means that the left side of the line is closer to the windward mark. So just by like where it is, this is favored because of distance, not because of wind. So you're still gonna want to start here, but say the course is still starboard favored. So you're gonna want to start here because just geographically it's closer to the windward mark, but you're still going to want to sail your starboard tack first, even if the line is port favored. So maybe you get lucky, you're able to get a port tack start. That means that you're going to be above the fleet for, I guess you're going to be more at an angle like this, but you're going to be above the fleet directly off the line, and then tack over, sail that long tack, and then round that mark. Of course, your priority should always be to have clean air, because if you're in somebody else's dirty air, you're going to be sailing slower than anybody else in the fleet. And it's very important to keep that long tack first strategy in your mind, but that means nothing if you're sailing slow. If you come off the line here below another boat, so this is you, you're gonna wanna tack out, head in this direction, and this boat's gonna continue to sail this way if they don't tack and cover you. And then you'll tack over here, sail this long tack. The wind's coming from this direction. It's a starboard favored course. And then, maybe you'll be able to have an efficient enough tack over here that you'll be able to catch this boat on starboard when they tack over there. So long tack first is very important, but you have to take into consideration where you are on the line, which end of the line is very favored, and which, what state of air you're in. So if you're in dirty air, get out of there. If you don't have a course that is favored one way or another, or the wind is going back and forth, what you want to do is you really want to stay in the center of the course. What a lot of high school sailors will do is they'll go all the way out to the lay line, so they'll just sail one tack, and then they'll tack, and then they'll just go all the way until they can tack and make the mark up here. What that does is that leaves a lot of chance for missed opportunities as far as wind shifts go. The best thing to do as a high school sailor is to stay in the middle of the course. So tack your way up in the middle. If you get a good roll tack, you won't lose that much speed, and you'll always be ready for a lift or to tack on a header in the middle of the course. Whereas if you're out on the corner over here and you start to get headed, so your course is going to start to go this way, you're going to lose a lot of ground. Whereas if there's someone over here and they can feel that header coming, they can tack on that header and gain on the next tack. My biggest advice for somebody sailing a high school race is stay in the middle of the course. The only exception to that is if there is a huge lift over here that's just been here all day and it's very steady, very constant, so it's not favored at the boat, so the wind's coming from this direction here, but it's coming from this direction over here, and it has been all day. It's always been like that. In that case, you'll want to start here and then head for that shift. Once you start to get headed on that tack, then you're going to tack and just cruise by everyone. But that doesn't happen really often. Shifts aren't always very steady. And then another exception, I said there was one exception. There are two exceptions. Another exception is if it's really light air and you see that the water's much darker over here, there's a lot of breeze. Make sure you don't mistake current for wind, because then you'll be pretty screwed in light air. So you see there's a lot of wind over here. Even if you have to go on the unfavored tack to get to that air, wind is always going to be faster than the favored tack in light air conditions. Light air being 5 knots or less. That's basically upwind. If you get headed, you want to tack onto the other tack. And if you get lifted, you want to stay on that tack until you get headed back below your 45 degrees to the mark, I guess. So if you get below either one of these angles, it means that the other tack is favored. That's basically upwind strategy. So stay in the middle, stay on the favored tack, and if it's light air, look for breeze, and do not go to the lay line ever. Alright, now downwind strategy. I'm just going to say a couple quick things about downwind strategy. So here's the start of the race. Windward mark. You go around that windward mark. Say we're doing a regular windward-leeward course. So you go upwind to the windward mark, you round, you're coming down. Say there are say there are like 4 boats here, all going downwind. Remember that rule, the 3 boat length circle, which means that you have inside room. If you're on the inside in the 3 boat length circle, you have inside room, so that outside boat will have to give you space to round. Coming from the mark up here, say this boat is you right here. What you want to do in this case is you want to stay on this inside position. If you're like, oh, I could cover one of these boats over here, you could lose that overlap, and that could potentially cost you 1 or 2 spots in the race. So yeah, my advice is to stay to the left, if you're going downwind, you want to stay left from your perspective. So you'll want to go over here to keep that inside position on these other boats over here. There are exceptions. If you're in the first few boats in a fleet and there are say there are 20 boats looking to round this windward mark up here, and they're just parading here, and this is all their wind shadow down here. You don't want to go underneath those boats, but you still want to keep in mind that you're going to want to be on the inside when you get to this mark, and once again, you have to acquire that overlap before you go into this boat length circle, this 3 boat length circle, excuse me. Yeah, that's pretty basic downwind tactic, but something else to keep in mind is current. Current plays a big role in races, but that's just something for you to keep in mind. If the current's going in this direction, then you're not going to want to tack exactly where you're going to make this mark here, because then you're going to end up, say you tack right here, by the time you get to that mark, since you're moving this way, you're actually going to end up rounding the mark right here. So you're going to overstand by quite a bit. So you have to take that current into account as you're rounding marks, and also on long beats upwind, you have to think about where that current's going to take you. So yeah, hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys in practice Tuesday. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to Facebook me, email me, even call me. I'd be very happy to answer any questions anybody has. So yeah, don't hesitate to let me know. See you guys later.